So, hang on, change my. Do that. Okay, morning, morning. So I thought we'd continue on with our space creation. And I have brought with me, it's show and tell today. So for those of us that were teachers in a previous life, Lisa, you'll probably find this highly amusing because I've had my pipe cleaners out. So I've made a brachial plexus. So this is it's my show and tell for today. Because how do you learn all of this stuff and retain it in your head? So, but the reason I wanted to share this is because we've been doing lots of neck and shoulder work and creating space into there. And we're not going to get into this because it's pretty complex stuff, as you can tell, even though it is hose and pipe cleaners. But this is the nerve complex, or only the major ones. It's not the minor ones, thankfully. But this is the major nerve complex that is coming out of the side of your neck, because you can actually put it on. I'm very careful. I did do it. I did manage it last night to actually put it on. It goes on like a sleeve. So if we think of this hosey bit at the end, this is the neck spine. So this kind of buttons on to your neck here. And then all these nerves come out into your shoulder and then go all the way down your arm. So when we talk about, and I've had this question a lot, and I think Diana, we've talked about it before as well. We've got like cold hands or fuzzy hands, or these things that we sort of label as carpal tunnel, or can be labeled as carpal tunnel. We start to blame certain membranes within the body for causing issues. It's really interesting when we see structures like these that it actually makes life really difficult to just point at one bit of the body and go, well, that's the issue. When there's many points within this nerve network that can start to cause trouble if these pipe cleaners at any point get squashed by the muscles that surround them, or the tissues around them the connective tissue gets caught up and starts to impede the message flow that's going through the hair. And, interestingly, this is just the nerves, it's not the endocrine system, it's not the blood system, it's not, all these different systems that are running through here. So it's not just nerves. Nerves is just one element of it. But it brought me back to thinking about, again, about the position of the head, and how much space have we got? How much freedom have we got in the neck spine for the vertebrae to be appropriately spaced? And then, of course, that then starts to impact if we put our fingers on the side of our neck. We've got these lovely things called scalenes that sit underneath the muscles that you can feel under your fingers. And underneath that is another set of muscles that run down the side of the neck into the collarbone. And they are, if you put the palm of your hand on your collarbone and then let your fingers rest up the side of your neck, that's kind of what scalenes look like, roughly. And out between those scalenes, pop these guys. So if we've got neck muscles or our head going forward, we can see where all of these lovely nerves and all their associated bits and bobs are going to start to get a little bit stiff and a little bit sticky and maybe not able to do their job as easily as they could. So that's kind of where, putting your thumbs behind your or underneath the skull, and just, I'm doing this a lot at the moment because I'm sitting at the computer a lot, doing a lot of bits and bobs there. So as the head comes forward, we start to lose space in the cervical spine. So if we put our thumbs underneath the skull, and just let the head rest onto the thumbs. And you can do this in laying as well, for those of us that are laying on the floor. We can just let the thumbs rest there, let the head start to rest back, and we feel that this instantly starts to give a little bit of space into the neck and kind of just takes the ears away from the shoulders a little bit. And that's important because it all starts to free up all this lovely nerve complex that's going down the arms. And it's exactly the same in the legs as well. Um, doesn't actually look much different. Just the nerves are bigger. They're sort of, if you wave your fingers around, the sciatic nerve is the same as your index finger. So it's a proper chunky nerve. So, but when it runs through the muscles, same thing. When it runs through the muscles of the back of the pelvis and then down the backs of the legs, because the muscles are bigger, same kind of entrapment starts to happen, and then we haven't got the flow. So we think about fluid flow with regards to blood and endocrine system, which is, lymph. So that water flow through the body, we want that to be free. But when we're working with structures like these, this is our electricity flow. So we need the electricity flow. I'm just finding it slightly amusing that pipe cleaners are metal in the middle, which is a great conductor. So how are we promoting our electricity flow? And electricity is generated in the body every time we strike the ground. So
Can I ask you
every
a
time
question,
we
Kat?
heel strike. Oh, sorry.
Can I ask you a question? I
Yeah, of course
I
you
had
can.
a sensation that sounds like a lot like this when I was playing paddle
Yeah.
sometimes, and it literally shoots up my arm and across my head. Is
Yes,
that system, do you think?
it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. It may be because you're playing because you're a bit tight when you're playing because you really, really, really want to hit the ball. So, and I'm a real I do this as well. So we grip our paddle too tight or racket or whatever it is that we've got in our hand. So can you have a slightly looser grip? And also, because there's a ball coming at you, if you think about a ball speeding at you across a table or across a net, what's your natural reaction going to be? Yeah, exactly. To go backwards, but we don't. We go forwards towards the incoming threat, and then we try to hit it with a bat. So actually, a lot of the time, what we tend to do is the ball is coming at us. We kind of brace for impact, and then we kind of hit. This is, you don't look like this, Joanna, by the way, when you're at paddle. This is this is completely me playing tennis at 15 years old. So, but there's a natural reaction to lift the shoulders and duck the head a little bit because we want to protect. We want to protect the really important parts from the ball. So there's a natural reaction that we then counteract to be able to hit the ball. So maybe just have a think about those things when you are paddling. Can you grip the ball? Can you grip the, I haven't got my words today at all. Can you grip your paddle a little bit looser? And just notice the responses that start to come through the body. It is an important response because, yes, if things are flying at us at head height, it's a natural response to not really want to be there. So we have to sort of train ourselves through that. But you might find that that shoulder is lifting just a little bit too heavily, and that would impinge that and cause that shooting pain. Shooting pains tend to come from nerve impingement up here, and the symptom is more down here than the other way around. Things like numbness and coldness and those other bits and pieces can be a little bit further down. Tennis elbow is another one that's a bit further down further down the chain. But we want to be looking at the whole structure. What's going on when the ball is coming towards us is the question that you want to follow. Does that help?
Yes, it does help. Thank you.
Good. So no, you can't have it. My black and white friend thinks that it's a toy, and it's not. It's quite fragile, and it took me ages. So no, you can't play with it. So we're going to lay on our back first with the knees bent. and just have a look at the correspondence between. So there is a there's a deep connection between C1, which is directly at the base of your skull, so you can't really feel it. If you go under the base of the skull, you'll find that your thumbs are sort of taken upwards into a V in the middle of the back of the head. And if we just let the fingers sink there, we're getting into somewhere towards the very, very top of the spine. And like I say, it is buried in lots of muscles and connective tissue, because something's got to keep our head at the top of the spine. But that has a tangible physiological connection to S1, L5 S1, which is right at the very, very base of your spine. And if we let the drawbridge of the sacrum just roll away, which picks the low spine up off the floor, just a little bit, not to the point where the ribs come off the floor, but we just let that sit bones really sink. And just letting the hips broaden and soften. We can really close the front of the hips around the front of the body if we choose to. And the more we feel that the sacrum can roll away, the more we can sort of just bring our awareness to the very, very top of the sacrum. So the top of the sacrum looks into the pelvis. It's a roof, it's not a back wall. So if we just allow that awareness, and we can just make pictures in our mind's eye of where the low spine connects to a kind of ridge or ledge of the front of the sacrum. And can we just allow from the pubic bone back, and it might be useful to put your hands on the front of the hips, find the hip bones, you can let the thumbs just sink. We've done this before. You can find that ridge at the top of the hips and just let the thumbs sink onto the inside of the bones. Notice if there's any tissue tension there. And we can just run the thumbs downwards towards the top of the leg, or that crease where the top of the leg and the hip meet. Notice if one hip is higher than the other. Usually they are, and it's absolutely fine. We don't want to get too involved with it. But just noticing if there's stiffness there in the tissues that can just be let go. Can we let the hip flexors go a little bit more? If we let the long thigh bones drop back into the floor and use the weight of the hands at the top of the leg to just create space between the top of the legs and the hips, you can give the knees a nice wave. And that gives us space into the low spine. You might be able to feel that. I'm going to bring the hands onto the front of the ribs and just breathe into the heaviness of the hands. So that the ribs can broaden and soften, and the out breath drops the shoulders down away from the ears and makes the back of the head heavy. So we're just going to do 3 or 4 breaths here. So as we start to feel that on the out breath, the shoulders drop away from the ears, we get more connection with the shoulders and the shoulder blades coming down into the ground. So as the arms come up over the body, can we let the arms just broaden the ribs at the top a little bit more? Collarbones feel like they're going to slide off the edges of the shoulders, but if they don't, it's perfectly okay if they don't. It's fine to get the fingers in there. Let the fingers sink below the collarbones. Collarbones can get a little bit buttoned onto the front of the body, and then they start to not allow things to move around as much as they should, particularly when it comes to that fluid flow and that electricity flow. So we just start to feel that the muscles in between the shoulder blades can return back to their original length. Now, for most of us, they're a little bit long. So can we let the shoulder blades drift together on the back of the body as the front of the chest starts to slide outwards? So we start to feel that there's a shifting of the muscles around the rib structures, that there's a lengthening that starts to happen on the front, there's a broadening that happens on the front, and there's a drawing together on the back of the body, and maybe some of the muscles there shorten. When the muscles underneath the shoulder blades are too long, they press on really important trunking, the nerves that we were looking at a second ago. There's a lot of trunking coming through there, and when those muscles are long, they start to impinge things. So through this process, what we start to find is that there's a space that starts to open up into the underarms. Maybe the arms become a little bit more free and start to drift up towards the top of your mat. And we're looking to get lots of space into the underarm. The shoulder doesn't move up towards the ear. We can take the head from side to side and just let the very, very heavy ear drop down towards the ground, which may give you more space in the opposite underarm, if that's the arm that's coming up over your head. So work with one arm and then the other. If it's good to have, if it's useful, have a hand on the base of the ribs. It can either be on the side that you're working into, or it can be in the center. But I want you to notice as the arm starts to drift, can it stay back into its socket, buttoned in through the sling on the back of the body, which will take you into the opposite hip, sort of opposite buttock, because it's on the back of the hip. Can we let the arm sort of drop in and slide down through that? And the hand on the front of the body monitors the tension in the tissues on the front of the chest and through the tummy. Because if we don't have the scope on the back of the body, then the compensation comes from the lifting of the ribs, or the shoulders roll around the body, or something like that. So it's just watching what are your particular compensatory patterns. You know, there's a million and one ways to dodge an efficient movement, and my body and your bodies have thought of most of them. So we've just got to come into this space where we start to watch ourselves. How do we respond in certain situations when we're requested to move in a certain way? A little bit like the paddle or the tennis. can we get in there and really see what's going on during, you know, just before and then during the movement? Can we do that? And initially, there's nothing to do, there's nothing to correct, there's nothing that's wrong. They're just responses that we have, they're just patterns that we have. So hopefully we're getting a little bit more space down the side of the ribs now, and a little bit more connection into the underside of the diaphragm and into the tummy. We're making sure as the arms come up over the head that we're not pressing our spines into the ground. We've still got the heavy sit bones, the pelvis tilting away from us. We've still got that lumbar curve and a space. It may be that the ribs are off the floor initially, but we keep drawing that smile at the base of the back of the ribs back down to the ground. So just a couple of times the arms can come up over the head, and then we make the hands super heavy, like they've got a weight in them, and the arms can just come out to the sides. Maybe just the elbow comes onto the ground, maybe the backs of the hands come close to the ground, and we can make this nice circle out, down and round, and the hands get back to the hips. We drop the arms back through the sockets to land the shoulders on the floor, shoulder blades on the floor, and then the arms can come back up and through again, and arms out to the sides, round and down. Pause if you need to feel or allow for the response in pec major, which is underneath the breast tissue. You might find that there's a big stretch happening either in the underarms or directly on the front of the chest. Let the pointy parts of the elbows be super heavy. Feel that the index finger knuckles are getting pulled away. Shoulder blades go together on the back of the body, and that allows for the front of the chest just to keep softening and broadening and softening and broadening. Final rotation. Be mindful that the jaw isn't drawing in at the last minute. If we're trying to get the hands on the floor, we can pull the chin in and flare the chest slightly, and that will allow the arms to come onto the floor over the head. And it's one of those, just because we can, does it mean that we should? And what have we lost in the pursuit of trying to make a shape? How's the back of the pelvis doing? So the next time the hands come back over the body, we're going to bring the feet into the equation. So just drawing the feet down into the ground and just finding behind the balls of the feet and the centre of the foot, front of the snooker ball heel. It's nice to smooth the feet on the carpet or the rug underneath you. Just to wake up the soles of the feet. We want that pull down through the front of the feet. We want the front of the ankles to be sinking back into the heels. And can we just pause there with that pull down through the feet and just notice what happens in the rest of the body? The pelvis will start to tilt, yes, but there's lots of stuff going on in the back of the knee, in the front of the hips. So can we just pause in those structures? Let the pelvis get super heavy, let the tummy sink back. The ribs can sink back. We just let everything on the front of the body sink back. So we've got lots of length on the front. The arms already, even before the pelvis has really left the floor, and come in and out a few times. Because the clues are in the preparation. You know, by the time we've reached end stage bridge pose, you know, we've lost a lot on the way through. So can we just set ourselves up well at the beginning? Big toes inside of the heels, long little toe side. Can we feel the spiral in the foot? Can we feel a freedom in the shins? We breathe out and let the ribs sink back. This all just helps us find our way into a bridge pose that's really, really spacious in the ribs. Maybe the arms come up over the head. Maybe the arms stay up over the head as the spine rolls back down. And again, that gets us into this, for most of us, tricky, sticky part, which is underneath the arms down the side of the ribs. And we drop the heart part of the sternum back to the ground. And then we can lengthen away each vertebrae through and down, making sure that the glutes don't get too overly involved. We can start to get to the end stage of our descent and we find that we've got glutes hanging on for dear life. And that just, you know, it means that they're overbearing and we don't want that. So we just keep coming in. Can we let the body move itself? As we start to come up through the ribs and we start to come into the neck, can we let the ears be heavy and take the head just very slightly side to side? We're still creating space because the spine is like the rope going down to the knees are being drawn away to the ends of the end of your mat. So the arms and the head all come into the shoulders and the neck, and the more the arms are drawn in and the more the head is drawn in, so the back of the head is invited into the neck spine. Just like when we lay on our front and we talk about the sacrum being drawn, invited into the low spine, it's exactly the same. Tendency at the end of our bridge pose often is to let the chin get pulled in very strongly, and then the whole neck spine gets pulled long and it actually flattens out the curve, which isn't useful over time. So just want to be respectful of those natural curves to the body. We do a lot in pursuit of space that might not be useful. You know, we start to stretch things out and pull things around. And it gives us temporary relief, but it doesn't stay. So the next time we come back down, we're going to find the elbows and just pressing into the feet again, find the edges of the feet and the long toes as the knees come over to one side. Can we breathe broad into the ribs like we did before? And the breath out drops the shoulders away from the ears. And it might just give us a little bit more length through the side of the waist. We're always looking to increase the space between the base of the ribs and the top of the hip bone. And we do that by drawing the legs through the hips into the deep waist. We do that by drawing the arms through the sockets into the thoracic spine. We do that by drawing the head through the neck into the heart center. So when we send the limbs back to their root, which is generally solar plexus area, that gives us expansion. through the spine. The spine can get longer when the limbs connect into it. So actually the idea of stretching gets a bit thrown on its head because we look at integration rather than separation. Noticing if one side is easier than the other. And you can make these as static or as dynamic as you want them to be. But they're a great opportunity to just check in and see what's been going on for you this week. Just create a little bit more space between the rib and the hip before coming back to the center. And just finding the feet again. So we're going to come over onto whichever side is comfortable for you. And find our way up into our square pose. So there's two things that you can do here. If you're happy in your square pose, we're going to be moving the legs around a little bit. So if you're happy in your square pose, it's great with the hands on the ground. Get some padding underneath the hands and the wrists if you need it. Or you can elevate your hands and put them on a chair or on a table, or just something that doesn't move. So again, we're letting the drawbridge of the sacrum just roll away. And that creates space between the sit bone and the top of the leg. Big toes get pulled down into the ground, inside of the heels get pulled down. Again, just checking in with the spine, noticing how we feel in the chest. Can we feel here? There's I always get complaints about wrists after we do a lot of square pose stuff, but it's so important that we're able to weight bear and put our hands on the ground. And the pinch at the front of the wrist literally comes because all our body weight is falling down through the hands and we're not supporting ourselves through the shoulder and our spine is not suspended. So we tend to end up with the body weight falling down through the hands where the shoulders, we're hanging off the shoulders. So can we draw the heart back to, the sternum back to the spine, just like we were doing when we were laying on the floor? Can we draw that back and in? And then can we draw the shoulder blades together on the back of the body and create this broadness on the front of the chest? You'll know when you got it because it feels like the head starts to lengthen forwards. It's like when the shoulder blades come together on the back and there's a broadening and a drawing back on the front. It's a little bit like squeezing the toothpaste, and the neck, spine and the head they are the toothpaste and they start to emerge out of the toothpaste tube. So can we find that? Keep playing around with where the body weight is in the hands, get into the knuckles and get behind the knuckles. Let the elbows swing round so that they're looking back towards the thigh. We need the rotation in the forearm that then rotates the upper arm, that then gives us more space in the front of the shoulder, and then frees up the side of the neck and the top of the shoulder, but it also pulls the body weight out of the hand and up. So it feels like there's a sucking motion that comes, sucking sensation that comes out of the center of the palm and goes back up the arm towards the spine, and it lands between the shoulder blades, but sort of to the top base of the neck, top of the ribs, base of the neck as well. So we just keep working with that. You'll find that the index finger will want to point forwards a little bit more. That's one of the things that we can notice with that. And just to follow it, the tissues in the palm might be grumpy. The tissues in the wrists might be grumpy. We don't put our hands at this extreme angle so much anymore because, well, we don't do much with the hands anymore. So can we keep sending the body weight out of the heel of the hand and back into the palm? Rest when you need to. Your child pose is available to you, and we can give the hands a nice shake. And start, when we're coming back to presenting the hands on the floor, start back in the feet and the front of the ankles and the shins, and the pelvis that is lengthening away a little bit. The sacrum, the drawbridge of the sacrum that's rolling away a little bit, all helps to distribute the rest of the weight down through the legs. Because again, when we're not force distributing, then we just load the joints. And force distribution is allowing gravity to pass through us. We do with it what we need, but we send it back to the ground. Can we make it so that we're not getting in the way? So from here, we're just going to take a pull down through the left foot, a pull down through the left shin, and just allowing the right knee to become free from the floor. Let the right foot be heavy initially. Notice if you throw the body weight over to one side in order to achieve the movement. Can we keep that center line, that chalky line that we talk about? Can we keep ourselves, our spines, in that center line with an even pull down through the hands, a heaviness to the back of the right hip, and a pull down, an equal pull down through the left shin, and the knee starts to come forwards. So we're not tilting the pelvis, we leave the sit bones long and away, and the knee might start to move in towards you and away. They're not big movements. So we just leave the right knee, right shin, right foot down into the ground, pull down through both hands. You'll know when you've got it because you'll feel it in the very front and sides of the waist, and maybe up underneath the ribs and into the sides of the ribs as well. And it's just that central, it's real obliques work more than anything else. And one side might be easier than the other. And like I say, if the hands start to get a little bit grievous, You can put them up onto a chair or put some padding underneath them, rest when you need to. But we really want to be getting into the legs that button into the underside of the ribs and the arms that come out from and return to the thoracic spine, rib spine. So again, remembering our chalky line as the knee can move. Notice if you keep tilting your pelvis under, it's a shocking habit of mine. I'm working very hard to unwind it because it's really, really, really not good for you. So, you know, if you've got your block to hand or you're practicing this on the replay later, it's good to have a block here. Or a book, something like that, not a big heavy book, nothing that will damage you, because the tendency that we have for many of us, it's a sweeping generalization, but we pull down through the foot, we tilt through the pelvis, and then we lift the knee. Can we leave the spine completely in neutral with the head being drawn away, shoulder blades together on the back of the body, front of the ribs drawing back and in, and the drawbridge of the sacrum lengthening away. Same movement, entirely different set of muscles. And if the leg is extending away behind you, can we feel that the big toe joint and the heel are getting picked up and pulled away? Because what that does is, if I can find it, what this does is it pulls the leg out of the waist, so from underneath the ribs, because legs don't finish at the hip, legs finish under the ribs. So we want to be finding that leg into the underside of the rib, and it's the sole of the foot that draws the whole lot away. How are we getting on? It's good. So you might find as the leg comes down and back and in, that we can start to bring the knee in towards us. Again, we're still leaving the pelvis lengthening away, and this will put more pressure down into the hands. And we're just finding, just noticing, can we just slide the foot? And maybe it comes across in front of the knee. So there's two movements you can do here, depending on how your hips are and depending on the low spine. And we don't want to be pulling around on the low spine for those of us that have got low spine issues. So the knee comes in towards the wrist that's directly in front of it. And then can we leave everything pulling down into the ground? And the foot will go towards the opposite wrist. So there's a rotation to be had in the hip there. And the knee goes out to the side, but the pelvis doesn't follow. As soon as we feel that the pelvis starts to twist, we've gone a little bit too far. And we can come out of it. It's all about being able to slide in and then slide out. Can we? And this is where it makes it quite difficult, because the muscles need to be able to maintain the tone for us to be able to do that. We tend to be quite sinky in our movements, you know, for those of us that do pigeon poses and have a history, this is me, have a history of sort of collapsing into pigeon pose. That's where, you know, that's where this comes from. But can we actually look at rotations through the hips without collapsing, even though the foot is coming towards the opposite wrist, we've still got that pull down through the hands. We've still got the pull down through the foot underneath us. We've still got the pull of the foot and the shin behind. So we could lift ourselves out of that if we needed to. And that's why it's a dynamic movement. That comes from the centre of the body. We use gravity and the weight of the limbs to support that. And it depends, really depends on how free the tissues are around the hip, but also how much we can connect the legs into the deep waist. So from here, if we just come to stepping through, you can tuck the toes under and just give the feet a nice stretch. If you've got your hands on a chair or wherever they are to help you. But again, when we're thinking about stepping through, we're still keeping the sit bones lifting away behind us. And then the feet can step through. And maybe they don't step through as far as we're used to, but that's fine. We'll find our way up to standing through there. We can try one side or the other. So again, once we found our way up,
Bud.
what we want to So once we find the feet, can we retain that quality of how we were feeling when we were closer to the ground? Can we feel that we're still a force distribution system, so we're still allowing the gravity to come through us and to go down into the ground? We're not balanced on the earth, we are part of it. So we just keep allowing that to come through and down, and we find the broadness of the feet. So there's a length to the feet, there's a broadness to the feet. So when we feel the inner and outer parts of the feet pulled down into the ground, we then start to feel the inner and outer parts of the hips. So notice as you roll onto the outside that the long thigh bone comes out to the side, but it starts to close the back of the pelvis. And when we pull down through the big toes and the inside of the heels, we feel that there's a minor rotation to the thigh bones, which just allows the pubic bone to drop ever so slightly, and it broadens the back of the pelvis. So you can play with this for yourself, just rolling through the feet and noticing how the tissues change at the top of the legs. So we start to get a space between the thigh connection into the front of the hip and the groins. So can we let the groins be spacious just a little bit? And what we find is then that helps the sit bones to disconnect. And you can do this for yourself. Just take two fingers, slide them up the back of, you can feel the hamstring, it's this nice chunky one on the back. Keep following that all the way up, and at some point you'll hit the sit bone. And you're looking to lift your sit bone ever so slightly. Now, for most of us, for anybody that complains they haven't got a bottom, Here's a demonstration on how you lose your bottom. You end up with flat bottom. They are talking about a flat bottom syndrome now. Everything's a syndrome these days, isn't it? But actually, it's nothing to do with glute weakness. There's been a lot of finger pointing about weak glutes, and actually, if your glutes are weak, you just fall on your face. Are they firing appropriately with everything else? That's another question. But the whole sort of weak glutes thing is currently being turned on its head. So the question is where is our body weight in our feet? Is it at the front of the ankle, very center of the foot? So that the heel extends away or feels like it extends away behind you. And then once we've found that connection, can we feel that the inner and outer edges of the feet can create space at this top of the hip, top of the leg, hip connection, and we can let the back of the pelvis, the sacrum, just be invited into the low spine. It's no different than when we lay on the floor on our front. So if it's nice to put the hands on the back of the sacrum and share some guidance as to where it should be heading, which is generally in and up. Because like I say, we want a sacrum that's a roof, not a back wall. And then from there, of course, now we need to find the front of the ribs. And we start to draw them back and in towards the spine without losing the pelvis setup that we've just created. And you'll know when you've got it, because if you press into the ribs and the pelvis tilts, it will send you back into your heels. You'll feel it. If you keep going in that direction, it'll keep sending you back, keep sending you back, keep sending you back. So there's a little bit of there's a large interplay here. There's a little bit of jiggery pokery between the ribs coming in and up and the pelvis staying at neutral. And what you'll find is we need more space on the front tummy between the pubic bone and the ribs. And we'll need some more obliques and those muscles that form the corset of the waist. It really helps QL to switch off. So for those of us that have got overworking muscles on either side of the spine, and particularly if you've had low back issues, that will be one of your primary stabilizing muscles, because that's what the brain thinks it needs. So we just keep bringing ourselves back in to that front of the ankle, center of the foot. You know when you've got it because the muscles at the top of the legs start to feel like they switch off. They don't switch off, they just go into power save mode. And then can we find our way through? So then we take our thumbs into the back to the underside of the skull where we started. You can interlace the fingers and let the head sit back into the hands if it feels good. If you're happy just with the thumbs underneath and you've got strong thumbs that will take the weight of your head, great. I like the feel of the fingers around the back of the head, gives the back of my head something to aim for, which is always useful. Can we let the spine hang from the underside of the skull? So when we're hanging the spine from the underside of the skull, can we just feel like it's like water? Can we feel like the spine runs like water down into the feet? The kneecaps start to switch off. The quads on the front start to stand down. The hip flexors let go. We start to have space. If we draw the pelvis, if we shift the pelvis forwards, let's not tuck it under, we start to find that there's a spaciousness that starts to open up on the front of the hip. There's no grip on the front of the hip flexor anymore. And we start to feel that there's a broadness to the foot, and the outer edge of the foot might start to slide back towards the heel when that happens. So we just keep following Just keep following where the sensations take you. Because when we're here in these held positions for any given time, muscles that are overworking really quickly reveal themselves. That shoulder that's holding on too tightly has to, it starts to complain quite quickly. The foot that's taking all the weight starts to complain quite quickly, and we have to do something about it. So there's nothing wrong with staying here for a while and just noticing where we get led. The body takes us by the hand and starts to show us places where we're holding on, things where we're just a little bit compensating too much, or parts of us that aren't doing the job that they're supposed to do, and they're loading on somebody else. So we start to let arms slide back into shoulder blades. We start to let shoulder blades descend the back of the body. We start to let the ribs hang from the underside of the shoulders. We start to let the pelvis sort itself out. We can release through the groins, and we can free the pelvis so it just hangs at the end of the low spine. There's a nice curve, and then there's the weight of the pelvis at the end of the spine. And then the whole lot's connected down into a central part of the foot with a 2-inch heel sticking out the back. And a good set of long toes that are sticking out the front. And this is a fine platform for us to work through. Quite a small surface area for quite a tall structure, but that's a great thing in some ways because it affords us a lot of play. A little bit like for any of us that have been up the Eiffel Tower, there's a whole lot of wobbliness going on. I remember when I went up it, it looks really rigid from the outside. You go up it and all of a sudden you start to find out that there's a whole lot more movement than you thought there was. Slightly disconcerting when you get towards the top, but that's the same for humans. We want that movement. There's an awful lot of movement that we demand from the head and the arms, facilitated by the neck and the shoulders. So it's all got to come from a really stable foundation. And that stable foundation is the legs plugged through the pelvis, plugged through the deep waist into the underside of the ribs. So if we think about that as our foundation, can the feet pull down and pull the waist open, because the ribs start to lift away from the waist. And a little bit like the tube of toothpaste that we were talking about earlier, we find that the head starts to extend from between the shoulder blades up, and the arms start to emerge from shoulder blades outwards and the sternum outwards. This is good. So we'll come down to sitting. And we just find our feet, find our heels. Can we let the heavy toes drop through the heels? And again, it might be useful to use a cushion here. Keep the knees bent as much as you need to find the sit bones and roll over the top of them onto the front part of the sit bone. Really easy for us to go behind the sit bones and just collapse here. We don't want to do that. And if the legs are very flexible, as soon as the back of the knees hit the ground, it disengages the central chain. So when we pull the heels down and lift the knees ever so slightly from the floor, it shifts the body weight back into the pelvis, and then the pelvis has to readjust. So we go bump, bump over the sit bones, and we start to find sort of the front part of that sit bone. Now, it might be that the tissues in the inner thighs, and the tissues on the back of the body, on the back of the legs, have to adjust to that. So if it's nice to bring the hands around the back of the knees, and let the knees rest into the hands. And again, knees resting into the hands pulls the arms out of the shoulder sockets. But if we press the hands into the back of the knees and press the backs of the knees into the hands, there's a reciprocal relationship that develops that allows the leg to go back through the hip into the deep waist and allows for the arm to go back through the shoulder socket into the spine. So we're self-supporting and we're self-sufficient in this way. We start to create closed circuits between the hand and the knee, connecting into the spine. Their common denominator is the spine, but it makes a circuit. So how do we keep feeling that the hands bring the knees, bring the legs back into the back of the pelvis, into the low spine and up, and the back of the knees into the hands, bring the long arm bones back through the shoulders into the spine and down to the back of the pelvis. And what we find is we start to feel that the collarbones can broaden a little more, and there's a spaciousness underneath the chin, front of the neck. And again, the front of the body gets lengthened and softened back into the back of the body. And the back of the body starts to draw into itself and shorten just ever so slightly, which starts to bring us upright. So we find that the head floats at the top of the spine. The spine can hang down. Can the ribs float underneath the shoulders? Can the pelvis just feel heavy at the bottom of the spine? And then we can just bring the legs in. However you like, legs out in front or legs crossed. And just bringing the hands onto the ribs. Thumbs at the back, fingers around the sides and towards the front. We're just breathing into the palms of the hands. Sending the ribs outwards, and then the out breath drops the shoulders away from the ears and draws the ribs in. So we can breathe in. Broadening. We feel the shoulder blades lift. They're designed to. The scapula goes up the back of the body on the in-breath, and then the out-breath rolls the collarbones and drops the shoulders. One more. And then just leaving the breath alone, leave the body alone for a second. Good. Taking a moment to check in with yourself, notice how you feel. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much. Good, good. Hopefully that's useful.